There we go. Hello.
Yeah. Hi, Michael. How are you?
Not too bad. How are you today?
Okay. I'm just going to give people a few more minutes. We got a couple of maybes, so I'll wait till about 12:05 and then we can go ahead and start. Sound good?
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. How have you been over the past month?
I've been pretty good. Lots of I don't know, the aura of all the holiday stuff is enveloping me, whether or not I want it to.
Okay. Any plans to celebrate or?
Nothing like really serious. Some stuff around here. What about you?
Same. I've just been working a lot. Very busy around the holiday season. I don't have any real plans, probably just work and then come home and spend the day baking, maybe cooking, just to kind of get in like the festive mood. But outside of that, no real plans.
Yeah, that's like my favorite way to spend that kind of time anyway. I do lots of baking and cooking.
Nice, me too. I love to bake and cook. Nice. So like one more minute and then we can go ahead and get started.
Okay. I'm gonna run to the other room for 1 second and grab something. But I will be right back.
Sure.
All right, I'm back.
Okay, so it's 12:05 and it's still just the two of us, so we can go ahead and start. Just like last time, I want us to just kind of go ahead and introduce ourselves again, our pronouns, and then our icebreaker question. So my name is Jonathan. My pronouns are he, him. And our icebreaker for today will be, what is your favorite season of the year and why?
Okay, my name's Michael. My pronouns are he, him. My favorite season is summertime. I love being outside, and it's much easier here in the summer than in the like winter, fall seasons. I like doing a lot of stuff. Um, especially out in nature, but also just like out and about. I live in the city, so there's not like too much nature, but I don't know, just being able to like sit outside at a restaurant or something, like go down by the harbor. Those things are all much easier during the summer.
Nice. I'm like the exact opposite. I prefer the winter time. Well, the fall and the winter, but more so the winter. I live in California, so our summers are really hot, and we don't get like snow and things in the winter. So I guess I don't really have any issues with that. But yeah, it's too hot for me. I'm just a complaining mess the entire summer, so I'm no fun for anyone. So I need
Yeah,
that.
I do not like it being too hot, and it is very humid here in the summer. But yeah, I take it over the snow any day.
Nice. That's so interesting. Okay. So this is my first time trying to hold a book club meeting with an anthology series. So I have a bit of a plan. Let me know what you think. I was thinking first we can talk about our overall thoughts on the entire collection in general, without really going much into detail on each story. And then after we're done with that, we can each pick like two, maybe three, if you have three, favorite stories that we can discuss at length. What do you think of that?
Okay, I like that idea because I was trying to remember today. I was like, do I remember something from every story? And I look back and they're like whole stories I didn't remember reading. But
Yeah, totally. And I didn't even finish. I read 9 of the 17, so I really couldn't do a full book if we wanted to.
okay.
Okay. So how did you feel about the book overall?
I liked it. I like the like shorter. For me, like the shorter pieces are easier.
Hmm.
It felt easier to digest. Um, and I know a lot of it felt like very young adult, which like going back and reading about the authors, it's because they're like young adult and children's literature authors.
Hmm.
So that makes sense. But I did really like the centering of like magic in all of the stories,
Hmm.
and how in I felt like pretty much all of them. There's just like this feeling of like otherness or like some sort of like little struggle because of these gifts that all of these people have, which I think like putting that in the lens of like a queer experience. But you know, it is in many ways a gift, many ways not sometimes, but in many ways it is like a gift to be a queer person, and felt like I could relate that back to a lot of the way these people dealt with their like magical abilities or encounters in the stories.
Nice. Yeah, I totally agree. I really loved the fact that we got a entire collection solely focused on not all queer stories, but at least all POC, more so Latinx stories based in Latinx heritage, which is something I personally never read before. I felt very educated, which I was very grateful for, to kind of learn about these bits and pieces of culture in each story. A lot of these are things I didn't know of and had never heard of. A lot of the, I mean, I guess, of course, a lot of the mythical creatures and places are obviously not real, but I believe that some of them at least have roots in actual Latin culture, which I thought was very cool. Um, but the one issue I had with the book is I guess I'm not someone who generally gravitates more towards books about young adults or teens.
Yeah,
And most of the stories were that. And it honestly got a little bit monotonous for me with all the teen stories because I read the first, I want to say like 8 stories, like back to back. And then I kind of
mhm.
skipped around after that with the stories that I thought would be the most interesting to me. And the first 8 were essentially all teens. And I just was very like, I'm kind of over the teen stuff in my
Yeah,
life, but it was
yeah.
still
I,
interesting.
I agree. And sort of on that note, I'm curious to hear, did you do like the audiobook or did you read the actual like the physical book?
I started off, so I guess I did both. I started off with the
I
physical
did too.
book, but because I don't speak Spanish, a lot of the pronunciation for me was quite difficult.
Um,
Um, so I kind of thought I would benefit best from an audiobook. So I ended up getting the audiobook and it helped a lot. It made the stories a lot easier for me. When I was reading the physical book, I had to like stop and Google things and like, what does this word
yeah,
mean? What is this? And so that was very hard for me. But um, the audiobook helped me a lot. What about you?
yeah. I did the same actually. I went back and forth between the two, but I found it curious that the physical book is divided into 3 sections, and at least
Hmm.
my version of the audiobook, there was no acknowledgement of like this is section 2 and like this is the title of
Hmm.
section 2. But I definitely found that like section 1, especially the first couple stories, were very like very teen oriented,
Hmm.
and there are some later on that are not, or not as much, or had maybe a little bit more like mature themes, or felt like they were like written from a more mature perspective. Um, but I feel like it really like if you're looking for those later stories, you might get off to it having so many of those like very I don't want to say juvenile, but definitely like more young adult teen focused things from the beginning.
Yeah, that's how I felt. It was like a lot of the issues and I guess the processing of a lot of their young teen emotions, I felt a little monotonous after a while because they all sort of, the characters at least to me, felt very similar.
Yes.
But once I got past it, I was able to really enjoy the stories and like see them for more than just a story about teenagers.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up the breaking up in sections because my physical book, like you said, does have these sections. My audiobook did too, but it's not announced. You had to look at each chapter and it would have like the section name and then the book, the story name and the author name. But yeah, I do think the sections are very helpful. When I read other reviews of other readers, they said that the breaking up into sections helped them sort of compare the stories in that section because they're probably grouped together for a certain reason.
Mm-hmm.
However, what I found interesting about the breaking up into sections is it wasn't clear to me if all the stories in one section are meant to take place in the same universe and like kind of happening all at the same time, or if each story is its own individual like universe and world. Did you pick up on any of that?
I didn't really even consider that, but now that you say that, it feels like it's a little bit more possible. Especially, I don't want to say especially at the beginning, but like all of those like outer space stories. I do, yeah. Like I don't know if they're grouped together specifically because of that theme, or if because there was like a like a larger thing going on of like where we're envisioning, even though these are all by different authors, these are all different stories. We're envisioning that they're all taking place in the same the same realm.
Mm.
But I didn't pick up on that until you just said it. But now that you do, I'm kind of like the wheels are turning to see if I can pick that
Yeah.
up.
That was like my whole thing this morning. I was like trying to piece together if any stories have connection or if they mention each other or, anything like that. Which kind of makes me think of something else. There are two stories in the book that deal with the subject of death or whoever death is in the universe of the story, falling in love with a human. It's a story about the young girl. I can't remember the name of the story, about the young girl whose mother had her with Death, and they then go to Death's universe.
Yes.
And then there's a story later on about a 17-year-old Death falling in love with, I believe, a bit of an older woman. I was curious if those two stories are kind of meant to be the beginning of the later story or not, if they're in any way connected. I didn't notice if there were any of the same characters mentioned, but did you relate those two stories at all?
I didn't actually. It was the one the I remember the one about the mother and death
Mhm.
and the daughter, but was the other one the one about like the children of the moon?
I don't believe so. The other one I'm referring to is it starts off with Death having to claim the soul of a dying boy in a hospital room, and then he meets the boy's older sister,
Yeah.
and he, I believe, implants a happy memory for her to remember her brother by, and then he later claims the soul of her dying boyfriend in a car accident.
Yes. Okay. I am thinking about the same story, but I guess I didn't. For whatever reason, I thought when I read this one about the person like takes the memories in the darkness, I
Mhm.
did not like equate that person to being death. But now as I like look back in here, there's literally a thing that says interlude god of death, like in the middle of the story. um, interesting. But I didn't equate those. But I don't know. I think it's possible.
Mhm.
It'd be nice to think of it that way.
Yeah, that's what I was like thinking of as because the one about the Death falling in love with the human woman, that's later in the book. I don't even believe they're in the same section of the book. Maybe
I
they
don't
are. I'm not sure.
I don't think
Um,
they are.
yeah, I don't think so either. So I was kind of curious if like that was intentional for, because I'm assuming that Zoraida Cordova is the one who collected all the stories and possibly even like outsourced writers to write for the book itself.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming if that was like her intention, or if the authors kind of got together and planned that, or if it was like a happy accident. I'm just so curious. And I couldn't find anything about that online, so I thought I would ask you if you knew.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So now that we've discussed the book in whole, do you have like 2 or 3 favorites or standout stories you want to discuss at length?
Um, so I definitely really like the siren story. Um,
Mhm.
and that's probably a little bit because it's like closer to the end, so I have a better memory of it. Um, and oh, there's so many I like. I also like the one about um the the girl being like the daughter of death.
That was
I
interesting.
would put that in like my top ones that I wanted to talk
Mhm.
about.
Okay, so for me, I have The Tin Man. That is the story about the viral sickness and where the young girl is the only one left on her planet, I believe.
Oh yeah.
I also have This Is Our Manifesto. That's the story about the teens who are wrongfully imprisoned and
Oh,
rebelling against the system. Hmm?
yeah, I really like that one too.
That I thought was really, really strong.
Chose like the two like post-apocalyptic stories. Very
Yeah. I guess that's what. Oh, I guess that's another one of my points. We don't have to answer it now. I guess I'll ask and then we can discuss it later. But I noticed, especially in This Is Our Manifesto and in the Tin Man story, they both seem to be stories that were post, in our world, at least in reality, post pandemic, especially Tin Man. And I'm curious if you felt that several of the other stories were inspired by the pandemic, or you feel as if that was like kind of not intentional to write stories about the pandemic.
I think the Tin Man story definitely was inspired, and I don't know. Did you put the trigger warnings in the meeting invite, or did it have them somewhere on the like in something about the book? Because I definitely, at least the Tin Man, I definitely was like, oh, this is a little too real, and sometimes, but
Yeah, I found those. I usually when I post a book meeting, I try to find trigger warnings or content warnings. I found those on Zoraida Cordova's website. So this is what she put together. I don't even think I mentioned anything about the pandemic. I did mention illness, but yeah, it was very, very real.
what made the Tin Man story stand out to you? You don't want to.
Mm.
I figure we can go in order if you want, in order that they are in the book. Is that okay?
Yeah, totally. That's totally fine. The Tin Man for me, I think what helped it stand out was I guess all of our real life experience with the pandemic and like how it was handled, especially when the story kind of tackles the issue of like losing family and like only having memories left. And the young woman only having the stuffed rabbit she got for her 15th birthday as the only pieces of like memory of her family. Um, all of that felt very personal and real for me. Especially, I work as a nurse, so I was very much in the like trenches of the pandemic and like helping people through that and through the illness. So I guess that really impacted me a lot. That story.
How did you feel about the robot in the story?
That oh gosh, that part of the story I felt was kind of. I mean, I don't know if it was intentionally there to add a bit of like light to the story because I found it kind of goofy. But I was very, I guess, emotionally invested in the story until the robot came in. Then I felt it took a little bit of a like almost comedic turn, which I didn't think was appropriate considering how heavy the story was before that.
Yeah.
Um, did you feel the same way as well?
It did feel like it really took it to a different place
Hmm.
than what I was expecting. Um,
Hmm.
I don't. Well, I guess I'm laughing now, so I guess I did think it was a little bit funny. But yeah, it was like it definitely felt like a big shift from like very very like heavy sort of like a emotion driven topic to almost like a quest with this robot.
hmm hmm See if I have anything else on that one. I have all my notes separated in my iPad and then on my phone as well. So here's a second, please. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Um,
There's many stories in many. There's like 100 characters.
yeah, so it's kind of hard to keep up. And also, I guess I was struggling because I kept mixing the stories and the worlds, and I was like, oh, that's a different story. It's a different world. So trying to kind of separate the stories.
Yeah, and actually, we'll say with the Tin Man and the This Is Our Manifesto, I don't think I realized it was two different stories until like
Yeah.
because these were two that I listened to on audio, and I just
hmm
like they just ran right into each other, and I was like, oh, this is like not even the same people.
hmm Yeah. hmm Oh, I guess for the Tin Man, before we move on from that story, what did you feel about the sacrifice that the young woman had to make between letting go of the bunny rabbit with her family's memories on it and going to the new planet?
Um, I mean that's kind of like very very symbolic of like letting go, leaving the past
hmm
behind to like go on this new journey, and not being able to like carry some of those things with you emotionally, but also like physically. Just like a very real like physical reminder. I also in my mind the bunny rabbit is probably way larger than it is
Oh yeah.
supposed to be in the story. Um, but
In that story, I agree first, I guess I should say, but in that story, I felt in the very beginning before she actually acknowledges that she's talking to a bunny rabbit and like not talking to like another person or the memories that are playing or just memories and not people she's talking to.
mhm.
I kind of thought like, does she have like imaginary friends or like that was not really clear to me until she actually says it's a bunny rabbit with memories on it.
Mhm. No, I actually would have found it very appropriate if you'd have imaginary friends being like a
hmm
soul,
hmm
being all by yourself, would not be surprising.
I also kind of wish that story would have explained why everyone got sick but her. I didn't really like, does she have something inside of her that prevents her from getting sick, or does it only affect certain kinds of people and she's not that kind of person? Did the story mention that at all to you? I didn't pick up on that.
I don't think it did. I also was a little bit curious if there are other people, right? Just no one like where she is.
Really,
Like, are there or no?
I, I'm not sure. I don't fully remember. I read that story sort of like in the beginning, I guess in the beginning of the month. So I don't totally remember, but I believe there was no one else on her planet, but she knew of life on other planets, I think.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that sounds right. Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm flipping back and seeing, confirming you are correct.
And the next story up from that is This Is Our Manifesto. How did you feel about that story?
Um, I did like this one, and I definitely felt remnants of like some things in real life probably.
hmm
This was inspired by.
hmm
Um, and I did again like it took me a little bit of time before I realized this was a separate story from the Tin Man.
hmm
Which I was like, oh, they're like on the spaceship now. That is my bad. But I did the whole idea of like putting prisoners in outer space was
hmm
maybe a little. I don't know. It felt a little too real, like a thing that like could definitely happen at some point in our future.
hmm
Um, and of course, like imprisoning people for not necessarily like evil things, even though they may be like technically illegal.
hmm
Um, not, yeah, it was a little. This one maybe started a little bit more discomfort than some of the other ones.
Yeah.
Especially with like the like and wrongful incarceration themes, like people fighting for good things. I did really like sort of side note tangent, but I did really like the one person that just like wiped out people's debt. I was like, oh, wouldn't that be so nice if someone really do that for everyone?
Yeah, all the debt and everything, that'd be really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that one for me also hit really hard because it's based in the Bay Area and I'm from the Bay Area and I live in the Bay Area now. So a lot of the things that's hitting on in terms of like protesting and like resistance, I have like been witness to and been a part of. And to imagine a world in which people, I guess even in today's world, we do have this, where people who have any sort of like governmental resistance or defiance get imprisoned or punished or something. So that story for me was quite scary to read. But it was really hard hitting, especially when it hit on the deaths that happened over time and the abuse that happened from the guards at the prison in space. And I found a lot of parallels in the use of the prison being in space, or I should say the idea of the prison being in space, and prison in real life, how prison in real life is so cut off from society. And then even after you're freed, you still are very much not really ever going to join society in the same way everyone else is. Like a lot of your basic American rights are taken away and privileges are taken away. So that story for me was very, very impactful and very sad to read.
I did also like that this one, I think was one of there's like a strong, I'll say like law enforcement presence in at least one of the other stories. But they're like looking at some of these issues even in a story like this one through like that lens of people of color, especially with law enforcement was. It was nice to see it sort of acknowledged even in a in a short story like this. But
also, I think out of all the stories, this one to me seemed to be the most like possible for our very much real life future. I could definitely see something like this happening in like, obviously not super soon, but in like several hundred years, I could imagine something like this happening.
Yeah. And I definitely like when even them just saying West Oakland 12, I was like, this sounds just like the Central Park.
5.
Yeah. I was like,
I also found it interesting how the author chose to use the AI caseworkers. They're all like white men who plainly state the facts of the case rather than trying to humanize the teens, which is oftentimes the job of an attorney or a lawyer. But I guess when you have district attorneys, they don't really feel a connection because you're not really their client. They're just doing their job. So I thought that was very interesting too, the parallels of that.
I don't think I caught that the AIs were like personified as white men. But
and then even I believe the judge, they even said, maybe the judge was real. I don't remember that part, but I know they said the AIs were white men because that's what the witnesses in court felt most comfortable with. So they used white men to show as the lawyers.
Oh yeah, no, I'm here. A tall white man with blonde hair and a big smile.
Yeah. And when I read that, I was like, that does not make me feel comfortable, but teach their own.
No.
Okay. You said one that I also read. What 2 stories did you say? I'm sorry.
I liked the Siren one a lot. And the one about the mother in death.
Okay.
I don't remember what is that one called?
That one was, let me see. Creatures of Kings.
This is the first story in section 2.
So I actually haven't read the story about the siren. I heard it's a really good one though. So if you would like, I would be open to you like talking about it yourself and then like telling me the themes of it, and we can discuss that. If that interests you. If not, that's okay too.
Yeah,
We
I mean,
can.
I would be into that, and I think that, I mean, it was one of my favorite stories in here, and it was one of the more like very forwardly queer stories. So
Mhm.
it definitely is one that I'm happy to do that for.
Okay. And I did read Creatures of Kings, so we can start with whichever one you want to. It's up to you.
Okay. Um, let's start with Creatures of Kings, since I just opened my book to this one too.
Okay. So just to recap, I guess, for myself, this is a story about the girl and her mother who had the inability of dying. The mother then attempts, or not even attempts, commits suicide along with her daughter by driving them over a bridge. They then ascend not to heaven, but to what's called the hereafter. The girl meets her half brother and her father, who she realizes is the king of death. She's also told that she's an abomination by her stepbrother and by her father. And until she takes over as the queen of death, the worlds, both the hereafter and the mortal realm, will crumble. And then she eventually does take over and is crowned queen of death. What were your thoughts on that overall story?
Um, there were a few things I did really like. There's a point in the story where she's like, she like has this realization. She's like, oh, like I am human and I'm deaf, and like both of these things
Mm-hmm.
at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like, as a mixed race person, that felt like a very,
Interesting.
having to deal with like dual identities,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, or having one identity that can be more than one thing.
Mm-hmm.
um, I definitely like related to that part, um, but also like having to sometimes having to choose, because at the end ultimately like she does have to choose, and she's,
Mm-hmm.
queen of death. That part, that stood out to me. Maybe because I was like looking for that or trying to relate it to my own experience. But um,
Oh, that's a. I guess I just opened my, I guess, my eyes to the full story because I did not make that connection at all. Being the character being both half death and half human, and then in very real life, people are biracial. I would have never made that connection. That's so interesting. And then when you brought up having to choose, I know a lot of people who are biracial feel they have to choose which side they want to be on. Um, hmm, that makes the story even better for me. Wow, thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, I also agree. I thought that it was a very interesting story. I really liked how the author in the beginning gave both the woman and her daughter the inability of dying. And then I guess for me, that brought up how oftentimes in real life we are trying so hard to live and like stay alive, but here are two characters who very much want the opposite. Um, well, I guess more so the mother, the daughter was more so willing uh, to be alive, but the mother definitely wanted to die. Um, and I guess it also kind of brings up like thoughts of suicide, like maybe people who either have suicidal ideation or have attempted suicide in the past, that like feeling of there's a certain euphoria achieved or a certain prize achieved when you die. That came up for me a lot as well. Um, Especially considering a mother who's willing to not only kill herself but also her daughter.
yeah.
Um, that came up for me a lot. Did that come up for you?
It did a little bit. I also like sort of had this, like maybe like inkling or idea that the mother really was having like these selfish,
Mm-hmm.
what felt like they could be very selfish
Mm-hmm.
decisions and
Mm-hmm.
actions, for the sake of her own, like romantic interest or longing. And sometimes like the lengths that people will go to for that,
Mm-hmm.
even to like, even at the risk of like harming your child in this case, even though
Mm-hmm.
of course she's not ultimately harmed, because of her like, demigod status, I guess I'll say.
I also feel like out of all the stories in the book, I think a lot of the stories benefited from the short story format. But I think this story, out of all of the rest of them, felt like a story I would be very happy to read a full book of. Um,
Yes.
and I almost wasn't satisfied with it being so short. I would have much rather preferred it to be like several more chapters long.
Yeah.
And like seeing how, I guess, seeing the process of what it's like to take over as the Queen of Death, um, and kind of save the world.
Yeah, and I would have been nice too to get more of that like background
Hmm.
between the mother and Death,
Hmm.
like a little bit of like a prologue. I would have appreciated that for this one.
Hmm.
Um, I did also have another like note or question on this one. It
Yeah.
had like very faint um, remnants of like the story of like Persephone
Hmm.
from Greek mythology, which
Hmm.
makes me curious about something you said right at the beginning about like what stories or myths are there in a lot of like Hispanic Latinx culture that I'm
Hmm.
not aware of that these are feeding from, and if there's like a similar story to maybe like the Persephone and Hades
Hmm.
thing, and is that what this is based on?
That's interesting. I also never made the connection of Persephone and, huh, wow. That's so cool that you brought that up. I love Greek mythology, but I would have never thought of that.
I don't know, for whatever reason I was like, oh, daughter of death. I know what this
Yeah.
is.
Oh.
But it was also very different in a lot of ways. But
Mhm, mhm.
still kept that in my mind in particular.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious. I mean, I know there is a like closing statement in the book. I did not get to that part of the book. But if you did read it, does it contain any like, I guess, any acknowledgement of like what stories are based on like very real like Latin mythology, or
I
does
actually
it
did
not
not
mention?
read the closing statement. I got to
Okay.
the last story, and when it was done, I just stopped the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
It is
definitely.
only it is only one. Well, is it? Is it just the acknowledgement page? It is only
Oh,
one
is it
page.
really? Oh.
I don't think there are bios about a lot of the contributors, which I did read,
Hmm.
but I did not read the one page before that has the acknowledgments.
I would have definitely loved to have that. I mean, I don't know if any of these are inspired by very real mythology and Latin culture, but if it was, I would have loved for Zoraida to include that. That would have
Yeah,
been nice. Hmm.
yeah. I actually don't see anything about that in here. It is just probably very well deserved page of thanks to everyone that contributed or inspired her.
Hmm. 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 Okay. So we can then move on to the siren story, and you can kind of talk about that a little bit.
Okay, and there actually was one other one
Yeah.
that I really liked. I don't know. Did you read the one about like the shopkeeper?
No. Which one is that?
I don't remember. I think it's maybe the one right before the siren story. Well, there are a lot that I like now that I'm getting back to them, but I will start with the siren one and then maybe just make a note about
Yeah, sure.
the shopkeeper one. But in the siren one, the sort of like I guess overview is that there's this girl that is living on a farm,
Mm.
um, and she knows that she's it's like very clear that she's like a little bit different from everyone else there. And at some point, she finds out that um, she was a siren, and in this world, in this realm, um, if you're a siren, you can like switch back and forth between being like a in the water siren and a person, but you have to like have your scales, your siren costume to do that. And if you lose them, then you're like stuck as a person forever.
Mhm.
And that she is like abducted as a baby by someone that lives on this farm, and they burn her scale so she can never go back to being a siren again. But everyone takes care of her. They live on this like little farming island. She's one of very few children there because it's mostly just like people that work there. Um, but she like of course always has this longing to be near the water, part of the water. But it is forbidden by this guy that is like her dad that has raised her. Um, she of course like later finds out why. Um, but there is also the man that owns this farm. His brother is like, in love with her. Well, I wouldn't say in love with her. He's trying to court her or sleep with her, and like bringing her all these gifts all the time. And they're just like increasingly like more elaborate and expensive and unwanted, to the point that he's like sneaking in her house and like leaving stuff in her house, and she has to like hire people to put a lock on the door so that he can't do that. And then he's like standing outside the house, seeing her and hiring people to like stand outside the house. But and of course, all this like happens at night, so she can't like go anywhere or do anything. He's like got eyes on her 24/7. But she starts sneaking down to the water and just singing because it feels natural to her. And she meets this other siren, like very very slowly over time. First, it's like she like sees a ripple in the water, then she sees a fin, and then the siren leaves a gift, and then they actually like meet, and of course they're like falling in love. Um, all the while, this guy's like still pursuing her, and like advancing more and more, um, to the point where like people on the island are like, oh, like your father's dead, you don't have a man, you need to like get married to a man, um, like soon. So the guy's like, oh, like I'm gonna marry you, and she's like, I don't know, I don't think so. Um, and there's like this like final moment with the siren where they kiss, but what she doesn't know is that this guy that's courting her like sees them, and he kidnaps the siren from the water and takes her scales and hides them and says that he's going to marry her, like marry the siren instead of marrying this girl. And I wish I remember their names so I could stop saying siren and siren. But so the girl now is like having to see this other woman that she is in love with, about to be married to this, not so nice man, and they're both just like so sad and despondent, and it culminates with her um, murdering the man
Mm.
and stealing the other girl's scales back so that she can go back to being a siren. And really, they're like running away together. And the girl's like, "Oh, I'll just like rip my thing in half, and like I'll never be able to be a full siren, but I'd rather be like in the water with you as like a half, I guess, a half girl, half siren, than like have to live apart forever." And they just like live their life happily ever after in the ocean.
That sounds very sweet.
Yeah, it was very sweet towards the end.
Oh yeah.
The murder kind of threw me because I don't think anyone else is like intentionally killed like that in the book. Not that I remember.
Mhm.
But it was the description also is very very gory.
Oh,
Or
okay.
especially compared to some of the other stories. Um,
Hmm. What made that story stick out for you as much as it did?
um, I don't know actually. Well, maybe I do know. I do think that like in the scope of the book that it is one of the more, I don't want to say like adult focused stories,
Mhm.
but it definitely felt a lot less young adult than some of the stories, which I think appealed to me or maybe made me gravitate towards it. Um, and also so much mythology around like the legend of the siren and all of these things that they are and aren't, and sort of seeing that in a different light that's more about love and less about like luring people to their death, was really really nice to see. Um, and also this sort of like very real thing that we see, in real life sometimes. Obviously, a lot less now. But there were definitely like times as a kid where I was like, oh, like I'm like gonna have to like marry a woman like out of duty,
Mhm.
or like like sort of had this like expectation of like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to do, even if it didn't feel right, or if I felt drawn towards something else, or knew that I was someone else, something else. It's like very, very clearly and literally reflected here, both in like her being on land when she's like a literal sea creature, and also with her and like this guy that's trying to like force himself on her. Um,
Yeah, just based on what you're telling me, I would agree. It definitely reminds me, like you said, it doesn't happen as much now as it did in the past, but oftentimes what queer women had to do in order to survive, essentially, marry men, or oftentimes get forced into marrying a man just out of societal expectation. Um, so yeah, I totally agree with that.
and it's really reinforced through the idea like you can't take care of yourself
Mm-hmm.
without a man, which is uniquely women's experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's been forced on them.
Well, I'm glad both of the, I guess, mortal and the siren got to be sirens together in the end.
Yeah, that was kind of nice. And then at the end, it's like, oh, like even as the farm decayed and all the people died, like the water still shimmers with these girls like swimming around, singing to each other. So,
Mm.
kind of cute little happily ever after.
That's nice. Okay. The last story I have that stood out for me, I should say, is the first story, Reign of Diamonds, the one about the two princesses falling in love from different worlds.
Yeah.
That one reminded me, I have to assume it's intentional, reminded me of Romeo and Juliet a lot. Did that come up for you a lot?
Yes, it felt very, very Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
And I think there even is there a part in this, and actually I'm glad you brought this one up, because I don't know if you got to read the last story,
Mm-hmm.
but I was curious if you had any thoughts on why this story was chosen as the very first one, especially as an introduction to. I mean, a lot of stories that don't necessarily relate very heavily to Reign of Diamonds,
Mm-hmm.
and then why the last one was chosen, which is I think the only one in here by the editor.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that was a little bit of like self-indulgence or if it's chosen
Mm-hmm.
as an intentional like close to this anthology of stories.
Hmm. That's a good point. I would have never made that connection. Hmm. Yeah, I would imagine it was probably intentional. I mean, I always assume in anthologies or collections of stories that the placement is very important.
Yeah,
It's not random, I don't think. So yeah, I would
no,
have to imagine that Zoraida Cordova did that on purpose. I guess probably to leave the to start the readers off with a story about true love and like finding true love, and then on a good note, I guess, and then also leave them in that same way. Uh, that's what I felt as I finished. I did read that story this morning. As I finished that story, it was a really nice wrap up for the entire book for me.
yeah, I thought so too, and I did sort of get like similar themes between the two, and I mean, there are obviously definitely others that are about like like true love and making sacrifices for love. Quite a lot of them actually, as I'm like looking back and thinking about them. But I did like that both of these sort of fell in that same vein.
Mhm.
But other than the Romeo and Juliet thing, is there anything about Reign of Diamonds that like really stood out to you? It was a pretty short one, wasn't it? I remember.
Yeah, it was only I think like 10 or so pages, I believe. Maybe 50, no, 20 pages. I'm sorry. For this one, yeah, outside of just the Romeo and Juliet theme, I felt it was a very emotional story. I really loved hearing the beginning of their love and then like how they tried to keep it alive throughout their times serving as princesses in their different islands. Um, I also really enjoyed, of course, the ending where they run away together. Um, but I guess what I have to say is stories like this, where it's about like two different, I guess you would call them kinds of people or whatever you want to say, falling in love, reminds me a lot of like interracial relationships. Um, and I guess it makes me wonder, since that was probably intentional, what was the purpose of not making one of the characters a different ethnicity? I think that would have also helped the story a lot.
Oh,
Does that
yeah,
completely?
actually, I I didn't get that, but now that you say that, I do also kind of think of, the Hispanic Latinx identity is really,
Mhm,
encompasses a lot of different things, like people that, are, Portuguese by heritage are very different than Dominicans, very different than, um, people in most of South American countries. And even with that one identity, there's like a lot of different things. So maybe
mhm,
that is intentional to not make them too separate,
mhm.
to sort of like capture or highlight that, especially since so many of these are, very very blatantly about, um, the Latinx experience, Latinx heritage.
Mhm, mhm. Was there anything that we didn't talk about in that story that interested you a lot, or even you didn't like?
Um, I don't I don't think there's anything I didn't like. I did like how short it was and how it's like
Mhm.
a nice little like taste of some of what was to come.
Yeah.
Um, I did feel, and I mean, a lot of these, I think, just short stories in general, especially, um, with these like, like high fantasy and science fiction type themes, have to like wrap up in very very neat ways sometimes.
Mhm.
We definitely saw that in this one. Um, but is there? I think there's a moment towards the end where they like one of them is about to kill the other,
Mhm.
or is like really seriously considering it.
Mhm.
Um, and I did think that was like an interesting point to conclude of like her being really pushed to that point of like I'll just end it for both of us,
Mhm.
instead of like having to like one of us, or like I will end it and deal with the pain so that you don't have to.
Mhm.
It's kind of, I mean, overly romantic, but
Yeah, now that you bring that up, it reminds me, I guess both partners had to uh, perform some sort of sacrifice. One of the partners had to decide if she was willing to kill the other, to keep the worlds at peace and like restore the natural order of things, or if, and the other partner had to decide if they were willing to leave behind everything and just run away together. Um, and in both instances, they chose the other person.
yeah.
Hmm, nice. Now, I'm curious, were there any stories that you did not like?
Um, I don't. I'm trying to like. Oh, did you read the third story
Is that the one about the polyamorous relationship?
about the polyamorous teenagers? Yes.
I hated that story.
Okay. I did. I was like, it was a little too indulgent, and I think
Yes.
too on the nose about a
Yes.
lot of things. Even like from the very first paragraph, I was like, I know exactly how this is going to end.
Yes.
Especially with the title, I was like, the first day of us. I was like, oh well, you've given it away, but
Yeah, that story. I mean, I have to give it props. I do like um, how it was. I don't know if it was the only story in the book that did this, but at least one of the select few that included a polyamorous world and a
Mhm.
polyamorous relationship. Um, but yeah, like you said, it was way too predictable for me. Also, that story I felt the most teen based. Like it was super high school,
Yeah,
and I
that
guess
may be for me the reason why I'm kind of am like. I think maybe if I was like in high school reading this, I may
yeah,
have a very different reactions.
yeah,
But I definitely was like not the audience for this one.
yeah. No, that's what I was gonna mention too. That story for me just was. Ugh, I wanted to skip it, but I was like, well, I might as well finish it and see how it ends. But I was right how it ended. So
But
okay. Um, something I read. in a lot of the reviews, I guess were two things I want to kind of touch on and ask your opinion about. Many of the reviews, and I kind of felt this myself as well, did not feel that short stories are the best format for sci-fi stories. Do you agree with that?
I do agree a little bit. I think it's just too. There's so much like world building that needs to happen, like
Yes.
understanding like how things really function. That I
Hmm.
at least found myself putting some of like the super sci-fi stories into what I didn't like initially pick up on them. Like, oh, I definitely put this into like a universe that I'm already familiar with, and just like place these characters in that to help fill the background of what was going on.
Yes. I, I agree. I think that because it's a short story, a lot of the world building has to happen very, very quickly to get to the plot, or it sacrifices the plot in order to build the world. And that came up for me most with one of the stories. It was the one about the character on the spaceship with the monster, and they meet the ship with all the children on it. I don't know
Oh
what
yeah,
story that was. Yeah, that one for me, I felt it really sacrificed a lot of the plot and a lot of the interest that I think it could have been an interesting story, but it sacrificed all of that to build the world. And it's only until the very, very end, where the story, of course, ends, that I think an interesting idea came about. And I found that to be the most disappointing story, I think.
yeah. And it's funny you say that because that particular story I recently, or while I was reading this, listened to a podcast that had a very similar theme of like this, like, monstrous, like mother being taking care
Mhm.
of a bunch of children in outer space, and I got them very confused. But I think it's because I was putting the story in the context of my podcast and not realizing they were like two, always
Mhm.
realizing they were two separate things, or letting the story be its own thing. But
Mhm. But I mean, I guess I can't say that I don't think that short stories don't work at all for sci-fis, because, well, I'm not someone who reads a lot of sci-fi stories or sci-fi anthologies. I have read a fair amount of horror anthologies, and I think those work really well. So I do think it's possible. I just think it has to be done in a way that where you focus on world building, but also give it a very strong plot, which I think a lot of the stories didn't do as best as they could.
yeah, yeah, I agree.
Another complaint that I saw in a lot of reviews is about the story Rogue Enchantment. Did you read that story by Isabel Ibanez?
I did. What were the complaints about this one?
A
I think this
lot
is one of the ones I really liked.
really, I mean, I didn't read it, so I can't speak on my own personal opinion, but a lot of the reviews felt it was an incredibly racist story, especially towards Indigenous people. Um, did that come up for you at all?
No, but now that you say that, I could see maybe some like tint to that. Are you sure it's like if there was like maybe I will say the River People story had a
Mhm.
very I I think had a little bit more of a strong racial overtone because the people in the story are like very clearly like white Europeans living in a Hispanic country and like grappling at times with like the some of the differences there. But I don't think I got that so much in Rogue Enchantments. But were there specific things that people said? But I in Rogue Enchantments, there's like this magical market, and it's like very competitive to get. Did you read this one?
No, I did not.
Okay. I was like, let me spare you from my probably horrible if I need to. But they're like this magical market, and you can get a stall in there, but it's like very competitive, and the stalls only go up, like maybe once every 10, 20 years will one become available. But it's like a huge deal to be able to be a vendor in this market. And this girl's grandmother dies, and she goes through like this incredibly lengthy process to be, to own the stall, and the people are trying to like kick her out. Uh, but like as you say that there can be some like potentially racist overtones. I don't think I necessarily focused too much, or if they specifically said that like the girl and her family were were indigenous, but they're like very clearly trying to like get rid of her, and like banding against her. Even people that are like being nice to her, it turns out in the end, the person that she thought was her friend was the one that was like sabotaging her the whole time. So I could see that, but there may also just be like a big piece I did not pick up on. I don't know, because it's one of the stories that I enjoyed the most for whatever reason. I don't know what that's saying about me, but
Well, let's hope that's not saying a lot about you.
I don't think it is. I think I just I don't know. I thought it was really pretty well written, and it was for me one of the more like captivating ones where I was like, oh, I can't stop. Like I have to see what happens next. But I felt like with all of them because they're so short. But
Yeah, that's not a story that I didn't read that story. But when I read that, I guess I was so thrown back because the entire story is about Latinx people, and a lot of the mythology is rooted in that. So I was like, it's interesting if it is racist to some people. I'm not sure, but if that is the case, I'm curious Zoraida Cordova's decision to put that in the book.
yeah,
Hmm.
I'm also curious, like what don't I know that is like tinging other people's perception of this story, or like what am I not picking up on because I don't have those experiences or that like oral history or mythology or whatever.
Okay, well, that's all that I have to discuss. Did you have anything you wanted to talk about?
No, I think that's just about it. How do you generally feel now that we've like talked through it about doing the anthology as like a book club thing?
I actually really enjoyed it. I think it's really helpful. The format that we chose for today, discussing the entire book and then breaking down a couple of select stories, is really easy. I was a bit worried in the beginning because I was like, how are we going to discuss 17 stories? It'll take forever. But I'm glad that we were able to boil it down to a select few.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad we didn't discuss them all. And also there were like one, two, I think there were like three. There are a lot of stories that like take place in high schools, and I was like not that interested in discussing those.
Yeah.
Which also probably helped.
Yeah, because of this meeting, I'm definitely interested in reading more anthologies. I also think they work really, really well for shorter months or months where people in the group may have a lot going on, like the holiday season. I was thinking another anthology series. I was thinking we could read another anthology series in February because that is a shorter month. Or even a shorter book if it's not an anthology series. Because I do have a few like less than 200-page books on the list as well. So that way we're not like struggling to finish a book really quickly. But yeah, I'm all for reading anthology series in the future, if you are as well.
Yeah, I liked it. I will say that I don't think I would like to like do two back to back.
Yeah, neither would I.
But and I also at some point there are like a handful of poetry books that I think would be nice. But again, those are things that like as much as I am like, oh, I'm like I feel like you read 10 memoirs, you've read them all. But it is still nice to like maybe do like a memoir or a novel, and then like something that's like a little bit more outside of that than memoir or novel, something more outside of that. But
yeah, totally. I mean, like we discussed last time, I do tend to avoid memoirs because they get a bit monotonous, but I do have a few memoirs on the list of books you want to read in the club. I tend to pick ones that are from perspectives or from certain groups of people that we don't get a lot of memoirs from. Like, for example, there's a memoir about a young boy dealing with his mother transitioning into a man in his adult life. That's a story I don't hear a lot, so I'm interested in that. There are also a lot about like people who lived through wars, but also being queer. So yeah, I mean, if we do memoirs or anthologies, those are the kinds I tend to lean towards. So that way we don't get too bored of reading the same memoir over and over again.
okay.
Which brings me to the book I want to read for next month. It's called Memorial by Brian Washington. Have you heard of that before?
I haven't.
Okay, I can send you the link to the book's description in the chat. Give me just a second. And then just go ahead and read that description and let me know if you're interested. If not, we can always pick something else as well.
Okay.
But it interests me a lot, if it interests you.
Oh, that's interesting. It just like replaced your picture with the link.
Yeah.
See, oh, funny, sexy, profound drama. That sounds like my life. Okay. That was supposed to be funny. I didn't even get to laugh. Okay. Oh, yeah, I like this one. I like the description.
Yeah.
Okay.
It also seems a little based on the rating. I mean, I don't tend to go by Goodreads star ratings too much because I don't know. I feel like everyone has their own opinion, but it looks to be a little bit controversial. So it'd be nice to get like differing opinions and things like that. But also being a story that's very heartfelt and based in like a lot of drama, which I like to read. So yeah, if you're comfortable with that, I can go ahead and put this up for next month.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
And I will continue to try to proselytize a little bit to my broader community. I know some people that would really enjoy this or have some like really good things to add if they can the time work in getting through the book. Some of them probably can't. But.
Yeah, also, I don't believe I mentioned this last month, but I would really love to start doing polls so we can decide on like the book for the month and the date and time we meet for the month. It's just, I've tried it in the past, and because there are not many active members, there's like 1 or 2 votes. And for me, that kind of defeats the purpose of a poll. But once we get more people in, and of course, more active people, I'll be putting one up. That way we don't have to decide day of what we want to read. But yeah, just something to look out for in the future.
Okay.
So I was thinking for next month, we could meet on either Saturday, which would be the 27th of January, or the 28th, which would be Sunday at 12 p.m. Do either one of those work for you? Do you have a different day and time that'll work better for you?
Either of those is fine with me.
Okay. Okay. I think I prefer club meetings on a Sunday. How do you feel about Sundays? Do you prefer Saturday?
I'm fine with Sunday.
Okay. Okay. So I'll go ahead and assign that book, Memorial by Brian Washington, for Sunday, January 28th at 12 p.m. You should see that link, that meeting posted on book clubs in a couple of hours. We'll do that. And then just to let you know about the recording, I tend to take maybe a day or two to kind of like edit it and then upload it on YouTube. So look out for that. I'll post the links in book clubs in the meeting description as well as on Discord if you want to go back and listen. Oh, also, I forgot to mention when we first started, I am so sorry about last meeting if my audio was messed up. That's so annoying.
Oh, it's fine. I honestly thought it was like something with my computer. Like I've not used Skype in so long, and I was like, okay, oh, this is like I just need to like figure out what's going on. But I was like, I can't like, because we were having such a good conversation about Blue Boy, and I was like, oh, I don't want to like stop it, and then he thinks I'm like disinterested in like the thing to try and figure out what's probably an audio issue on my end, but.
No, I think it was totally me. I listened back and I was like, oh my God, what is going on?
But I did. I was really happy to see that you posted. Thank you, because I'd use that to share, with some of my friends who definitely they were like, "Oh, this like I could do this." I'm like, "Yes, you could. You could read a book and talk about it, and have good things to say." But
that's why I really enjoy recording these meetings. I know some people think it's a bit weird. I've gotten like some, I guess, complaints about it, but I think it's a good idea because it allows potential new members to see how it works and see if it's really for them before they actually join the club. Also, I think it's always nice to look back, especially if you're someone who's like missed a meeting or can't make a meeting, but you still want to hear the conversation. You can go on YouTube and hear the whole thing. But also in the future, as we gain more members, I would love to start inviting authors to our discussion, to kind of like ask questions and like pick their brain about the book. And I would use the club recordings to kind of help them see the kind of club we have and the discussions that we have. Like for example, with Blue Boy, if we would have had probably over 10 participants, I would have totally reached out to Rakesh Satyal and asked if he wanted to come.
Oh, yeah, and like with Reclaim the Stars, there's so many authors in here, we definitely could have gotten
Yeah, like at least one.
at least one. Yeah.
Also, I find that's much easier with like smaller authors. They tend to be very reachable, especially through Instagram. And I'm comfortable reaching out and like we can brainstorm questions and have them come in. But that's of course down the line when we get more members and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's all the business I had to take care of for today in terms of the club.
Well, I will just say thank you again. I appreciate you organizing. I know it's probably some work to like do the book clubs and the organizing and the recording and the editing and the posting. But I really enjoying this. I'm very glad I found it by accident on Reddit. And will
Yeah, that's another question I was going to ask you. How did you find the club? You found it on Reddit?
I found it in a comment on, I don't remember what the Reddit post was about, but it was a comment on a different Reddit post. I don't even remember which subreddit it was on. But
well, that's beautiful. I'm so happy you found us. I can't thank you enough for, of course, your kind words. Thank you so much for just saying that. It's no work at all. I mean, I really enjoy doing this. This is really important to me. So it's no hassle for me to do this. But I also really appreciate you joining. I mean, you are the reason this space exists. Without you, it would just be me. So thank you for also helping create a space where other queer POC readers and writers can come and like hear stories they can see themselves reflected in. That really means a lot to me that you joined.
no, well, thank you.
Of course. So I think that's it. Oh, just a reminder. If you could go into book clubs and rate the book, that'd be really good. That just kind of helps me gauge the interests of each of our books so I can know like what kind of books we like and what kind of books we don't like. You don't have to do it now. You can do it whenever you want. But just you can keep that in mind.
Okay. I'll probably just forewarning rate them all. I won't say kind of highly, but I don't know. I enjoy a lot of different things, and I tend to put a positive spin on everything. So
yeah, same.
You get a bunch of like 4-star ratings from me on books. It's because I genuinely feel that way about them, or am like finding the positives in them.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Actually, I feel kind of bad when I rate a book anything below like a 6, because I'm like, imagine all the hard work the author had to go through, and so I feel bad. But I'm trying my best to be honest.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as always, it was a pleasure talking to you, Michael. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
Again, look out for the recording in a couple of days. You'll see the link when it is posted. And you have a nice day. And enjoy your holidays if you celebrate.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks. Bye-bye.